Nature isn't just out there in some far-off exotic location. It's all around us, including right outside our doors. Hi, my name is Shannon Trimboli, and I am the host of Backyard Ecology. I invite you to join us as we ignite our curiosity and natural wonder, explore our yards and communities, and improve our local pollinator and wildlife habitat. Hi, everyone. Today we're talking with Bill Napper. Bill is a volunteer naturalist at Bernheim Arboretum, a caver, an author, and much more. Hi, Bill. Welcome to Backyard Ecology. Thank you for talking with us today.
Hi, Shannon. It's an honor to be with you this evening.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. And the reason I wanted to talk with you tonight on the podcast is because you've spent a lot of time helping others really learn to enjoy and appreciate nature's nightlife. And I think that's really important and valuable because many of us, let's be honest, once we get inside and we eat supper, after a long day, we just kind of sink into the couch and never really go outside to explore and really learn much about nature's nightlife. And so nature's nightlife often kind of gets forgotten about and overlooked. But you and I both know that that night shift can be just as exciting and just as active and interesting as nature's day shift. So before we dive too deeply into that nightlife, let's take a couple of minutes to just tell everyone a little bit about your background, especially in regards to your volunteer work.
Sure. Well, growing up, I really enjoyed traveling. I didn't get to travel a lot, but I was fortunate enough to travel a few times out west to go to some national parks. And that really inspired me to just have a very curious nature. And as I got older and started earning money with jobs and all those adult things, I spent a large amount of my money traveling for adventure because I thought adventure was somewhere else. And it's so awesome, the name of your podcast, because that really tells my story. Because eventually I figured out, I can't maintain this amount of travel and have any form of. So I'm going to find out what's in my own backyard. And lo and behold, a friend of mine suggested that we volunteer for a place called Bernheim Arboretum and Forest. And they just have a wonderful program to welcome people in who are inexperienced volunteers, but have a passion for nature. So I walk into the program completely with no experience, just a lot of passion. So I always had that passion for the outdoors, but I really didn't have a deep understanding. I just enjoyed the beauty of it and the experiences of it, but I didn't look behind the curtain, so to speak. And that program at Bernheim for volunteer naturalists really helped me develop that ability to look behind the curtain. I did not start out as a night naturalist. I kind of fell into that because there wasn't a lot of other people that wanted to be out at night, for one thing. It worked with my work schedule. I worked full time through all of this. And it just really captured my heart because it is so magical and awesome, as you were saying earlier.
So there are really so many different awesome and amazing nocturnal animals that we could talk about. And I want to talk about a bunch of them
Okay.
because I know you talk about a bunch of them too in some of the programs that you do and that you lead at Bernheim. But it's hard to pick which one to start with because, well, there are so many great ones that we could talk about. So I'm going to be a little mean here. Sorry, I didn't warn you. I might be a little mischievous here.
That's okay.
But I think to start out with, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what some of your favorite nocturnal animals are? And that's the mean part, is picking favorites.
Yes, I know what you're saying. It's more like your favorite at the moment because as you as you go through this journey of discovery, as it was for me, it's changed, and I don't know if change is the right word, but it's expanded, I should say. So at any given time, my favorite would have changed. I've been doing this, I tell everyone I've now spent a decade in the dark at Bernheim, but it's changed and expanded over the years. And I won't get too far off course here, but I will say that I seem to have a weakness for the creatures that get noticed the least a lot of times. And that's because I just feel like people don't give attention to certain things. Other things they will get their attention, whether they want to give it or not. Mm-hmm. So fireflies, for example, their beauty captivates everyone easily. And yes, they are one of my favorites. But a lot of times I'll try to focus on other creatures that aren't as obvious. And that's because I want to try to give them a voice the best I can. So, as an example of that, I guess one of my latest would be, and this is kind of obscure for people, and you probably won't get too excited when you hear it, crickets and katydids, of all things. And like everything else in nature, once you kind of dive into that rabbit hole, you are just astounded at what you find. So Shannon, I might turn it back on you and say, picture in your mind right now what a cricket looks like. Mm-hmm. I would say the chances are, just like with me, you would have pictured some type of black cricket that you would see in your yard, something like that. But as it turns out, there are so many, different types of crickets in our region being the Southeast, I would say, that it's mind-boggling. And an example of why I love them so much is because the sounds they make at night are magical. And people love frogs and they love other sounds that they hear at the night, the night jars, such as whippoorwills, things like that. And they're all wonderful. But, I'm finding that these little crickets and katydids have their own unique voices. Matter of fact, they all sing, or you can call it a call. They have a call song that's unique to their species. Mm-hmm. So I would say there are at least 26 different species of crickets in our region. And what most people don't know is a lot of times what they're hearing at night isn't even a cricket, it's actually a katydid. And I think there's over 30 different species of those. And each one of those will make their own unique sounds. Ooh. So I know that's probably kind of an odd one. I wouldn't have guessed that we would have started out our conversation by me diving into crickets and katydids, but I think it's a great example of how, a lot of people don't give them a lot of credit, and I'm finding that they are just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, crickets and katydids, that's not where I thought you were going to go with it either, but no, it is interesting. And I love the fact that you bring up right from the beginning that listening, it's not just all about what we see. And yeah, I knew there was lots of different species of crickets, but I didn't realize there was that many species of katydids as well. And while they're not the ones that would have popped in my mind as some of my favorites, because I'm like you, my favorite changes from minute to minute pretty much sometimes. But at the same time, I can't imagine a warm summer night without listening to the crickets and the katydids going. I mean, they're just part of that background noise, and it's a beautiful part of the background noise.
Yeah, and like I said, the more you dive into that, it's just amazing what you'll find. There's a subset called tree crickets, and they are anything but typical looking crickets. They have neon green bodies with translucent wings, and they are beautiful. I mean, they're elegant, they're beautiful, and they make this high-pitched trill. And when a whole forest is filled with that, it's really magical. And then you have others that they buzz, they trill, they just make this wide variety of sounds. Each individual species is so different from another. There's even a species that's called synchronous. They don't all start at the same time, but somehow magically they all know to end their calling at the same time. So maybe you've heard of the synchronous fireflies. Well, we actually have synchronous, actually it may be a katydid. I said a cricket, but I think it's a katydid, synchronous katydid, where they synchronize their calls to attract the mates. So as you can tell, I can easily dive down rabbit holes. So you're going to have to pull me back up from time to time.
Oh no, I love rabbit holes. And that's what tonight's about, is just kind of diving down some of these rabbit holes and learning a little bit about all these different animals that we might find, and maybe talking about some non-animals as well that are part of that night scene.
Absolutely. Let me share with you just a couple more amazing things about these crickets and katydids before
Mhm.
we move on. For one thing, their sounds, like I was describing, there's one that sounds like an old-fashioned yard sprinkler. So I'll do a horrible impression of that now, but it's like the that sound, and that always cracks me up to hear that.
Mhm.
And there's several species that have variations on that, each one slightly different. And no, I can't really cricket by ear. You've heard of birding by ear. I
Mhm.
can't really say I'm a great cricket by ear identifier, but I know quite a few, probably more than your average person would. But some other ones, the mole cricket is amazing. Are you familiar with the mole cricket?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah, well, one of the fun things I'll share with the mole cricket is that when I hear that in this area, it's usually in the fall after like all the frog calling has completed. But this mole cricket, it has one of the lowest pitch frequencies of any insect. And
Mm.
every fall, when I hear it for the first time, I'll think, wait a minute, what's a frog doing out this time of year? But in reality, it's a mole cricket. So
Cool.
that's a fun one for me.
Mhm.
I always look and or listen for that each year, and I feel cheated when I don't get to hear one. I don't hear one every year. You have to, as you know, you have to listening and watching to observe these things.
Mhm.
And then the last one that I'll share with you, I guess, would be the one called the robust conehead katydid. This is a fun one because a lot of people have heard this one. So if you've ever been driving down a somewhat urban or suburban, I should say, maybe even country road at night, with your windows rolled up, this katydid is so loud that you can hear it as you drive past one with your windows up.
Oh, wow.
In fact, they've measured it and you can hear it from 1,000 feet away. It's just amazing. And if we were on my program right now, I would actually play those sounds for you. And I'm always happy when I hear people say, oh, yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. Having led night hike programs myself and done some of that too in the past, yes, it's always so fun and so exciting when people go, "Oh yeah, I've like you said, I've heard that or I've seen that. I just didn't know what it was at the time."
Right? I mean, and Bernheim has this saying, I mean, their mission statement is connecting, part of their mission statement is connecting people with nature. But everyone at Bernheim and myself included have learned we're just reconnecting people with nature that, they're
Mm.
already a part of. So that's fun.
Yes, exactly.
So that would be my latest favorite that I have been diving into, and I'm hoping to spend more time this fall. That's when they really ramp up, is in the fall. I mean, there's crickets, start earlier than that, but it really gets busy with a lot of the different katydids, as you know, later in the year.
Mhm.
One more quick thing on the common katydid. That's the one that most people are familiar with. Katydid, katydidn't, katydid, katydidn't. That one, when I hear the first one, it's always around July 4th. I'll walk outside and I'll listen for, 3 days before, 3 days after, listening for that. And it's just like clockwork. And it just happens overnight. It's amazing. But when
Mhm.
I hear that, I enjoy walking in and telling my wife, 90 days until the first frost. Of course, she doesn't like to hear that, but
No.
that's what the old timers used to say. When you hear your first katydid, it would be 90 days to your first frost.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that piece of folklore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on some of my favorites, I appreciate those off the cuff weird ones, like you said, that people don't often think about right away. But I'll have to admit, I think some of my favorites are still the ones that get a lot of the attention with them. I mean, lightning bugs. By now, a lot of people have heard my conversation with Lynn Faust on lightning bugs. I mean, I love my lightning bugs. If you haven't heard the episodes with Lynn Faust, go back and listen to them after you get done listening to this one. But lightning bugs are always going to be one of my favorites.
How could it not? I mean, they are so magical. And most people who know me would have guessed that that would have been my number one first pick. But like I said, I mean, it comes and goes. And I've been diving into lightning bugs now for the last few years. And I mean, it's just amazing. And every year there's something new. I've been fortunate enough to actually document new species for Bernheim that, as far as I can tell, have never been documented in Bernheim before over the last few years. And all that's been with Lynn's help. Like you mentioned, the podcast with her, she has just been so giving. And when I first reached out to her, you know, she has that wonderful book. And if you haven't seen her book, for those of you listening to the podcast, you really need to check out Lynn Faust, her book on fireflies, glowworms, and lightning bugs. But you know, she was like a celebrity to me. But she's been so kind in all my questions, and I'll send pictures and ask her help for identification and things. Anyway, she's been very kind to me, and she's I consider her a mentor for sure in fireflies. So with that, we have documented the blue ghost firefly at Bernheim. We've documented one called Paractomina angulata, and I've actually led public programs to view these fireflies. As far as I know, there's no other public program that has offered the ability to go out and see the one called Paractomina angulata, but it catches your attention because it is an amber flashing firefly.
Ooh.
So I have lived here my whole life in the county where Bernheim Forest is at, and never seen one of these until I was out deeper in the woods. And I'm standing there with a group, the first time I spotted it with a group, and we're watching the blue ghost, which, if your viewers aren't familiar with that, blue ghosts are forest fireflies that will light up and stay continuously lit for up to 30 seconds or so at a time. So they're not flashing. So they light up and they fly about 3 feet above the ground like little fairies flying through the forest. And it is just spectacular to see. So the group I was leading, we were enjoying that moment. It was really magical. And all of a sudden, a firefly comes by and flashes, I don't know what it is, 7 or 8 times, an amber color. And in the darkness where we were under the tree canopy at the time, it was just so brilliant and bright. And it blew my mind. I said, immediately, I couldn't help myself. I said, what was that? And I had no idea that we had any type of fireflies that flashed other than green or yellowish green.
And now you just gave me another one I have to look for once it warms up. Now, what time of year are we looking for that one? When in the season? Is that earlier or later?
That would be in probably, I think that was May.
Okay.
I believe that was in late May is when we spotted that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be in Lynn's book. So if you have Lynn's book, it will certainly clue you in on that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So I'll have to go look it up and see when I need to start looking for that one. Because that would be cool. I'm like you. I've never really noticed anything other than kind of greenish, yellowish colors.
Right. Well, funny story. It took me a couple of years to identify the blue ghost firefly. But you got to remember, I couldn't name a single firefly when I got started with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I just
thought, firefly.
It's a firefly like you see in your yard. Matter of fact, I didn't even call them fireflies. They were lightning bugs. So anyway, it took me a couple of years to finally get confirmation that it was the blue ghost firefly that we were seeing, because it didn't look blue to me. So I thought, why would they call it blue if it doesn't look blue? And I could go on, but I'll refer everyone back to Lynn's podcast for fireflies. But long story short, they can appear blue, but it depends on your age, your vision, your distance from it. There's a lot of variables that go into it. So it can kind of have a bluish tint. But to my eyes, it was green, not blue.
Yeah, completely understand that. But yeah, I mean, and I think it's important to have those species or groups of species that really captivate and create that touch point for us, that then kind of leads us down that road and into those rabbit holes of all the other not quite so charismatic, I guess is the best way to put it, critters.
Well, boy, one comes to mind when you put it that way. I have one that comes to mind. Let's see if you agree. The possum.
Which way are you calling it? Charismatic or not charismatic?
Well, I would say from a public, I love it. I think they're cutest things ever. And I love their story. But these programs, I see firsthand, a lot of people do not view them as charismatic, and they don't give them the respect and love they deserve. So that's one that I actually talk about quite a bit, and really try to help people understand why they should love possums.
Mhm. Yeah, you see cute drawings of them sometimes. I mean, especially I remember growing up seeing really cute little drawings of cute little possums, but yeah, people don't always appreciate them as much in real life.
Yeah, it's always their tail, I think, is what blocks a lot of that. Their tail kind of appears like a large rat tail or something like that.
Mhm.
And I think that really, for some reason, puts a negative in people's mind that maybe they're some type of large rat or something. But, like you're saying, anyone that's in nature a lot just can't help but love them because they're so wonderful. I mean, they are just wonderful creatures. And I have pictures that I show on my iPad during the program. And one of the pictures that just makes everyone go, the collective, oh, is the one showing the babies, as they're born. As you probably know, they're the size of a bumblebee. And I have a picture of a tablespoon that has like 5 of them in a tablespoon. That's how small they are. So the size of a bumblebee when they're born. And then, of course, get to talk about the fact that they're marsupials, which is mind blowing. Who thought we had marsupials here in the United States? You equate that usually with Australia, of course.
Mhm.
And then tell their story of how they were born as the size of a bumblebee and then crawl into the pouch, just like a kangaroo will, and further develop. And then have some other photos that show how the mother carries them around. And it's just a wonderful mother to them. They're really cute.
Oh, yes, they are. And then I think some of the other ones that are really charismatic touch points, at least for a lot of us, are the nightjars. So depending on where you're at, that could be the poor wills, the whippoorwills, the chuckwills, widows, or typically in more kind of urban, suburban areas, you're going to have the nighthawks.
Yes. Yeah, that is one of our biggest draws at Bernheim, actually. We have people that sign up for that. Usually, elderly people are the ones I'm referring to here because they remember when nightjars were more plentiful and they remember that from their childhood. And now they may not get to experience that. And I mean, it's a really moving experience for a lot of our guests when they come in and we all get into a passenger van and we drive back into the forest and we get out and then, try to get there just before the nightjars start. In this case, the whippoorwills start singing and listen to that transition from the day shift to the night shift. So you might hear a peewee and then maybe a wood thrush, and then slowly the light fades, and all of a sudden you start hearing that whippoorwill repeating. And it's so satisfying to me to be able to take people out and let them experience that again. They just love it.
Yes. The two things I have to run out as soon as the first ones appear are first fireflies, lightning bugs. I have to run out and watch them for a bit. And the first whippoorwill or chuckwill's widow. Some years it's whippoorwills that I'll hear first. Sometimes it's chuckwill's widows. And I'll just have to run outside and again, sit on the porch or stand there and just listen for a while because yeah, that's just part of summer for me is listening to those.
Well, you must live somewhere really awesome for nature because I literally live next door. My property line backs up to Bernheim, and I never hear whippoorwills or chuckwills widows from my house. We have to drive kind of back into Bernheim forest a little bit before we actually hear them. So that's awesome that you have that at your house. That's wonderful.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been lucky. Most places I've lived, except for when we lived in town for a few years. Most places I've ever lived, I've been able to listen to them from my yard, one or the other. It's not all the time, but I'll be able to listen to them at least part of the year from my yard, which is just amazing. I love it.
That's awesome. Are you familiar with John Burroughs? A lot of times people have heard this, but John Burroughs, famous naturalist, of course, he once documented hearing a whippoorwill repeat its call 1,088 repetitions before pausing.
Oh, wow.
And that's really amazing. But during the programs, I try to point out that's part of how the females are choosing their mates.
Mm-hmm.
They're using that to figure out if this male's strong, good genetic line, and things like that. And so it's very important. That brings up the discussion about actually noise pollution. I was back deep in Bernheim one evening, and I was listening to a whippoorwill call, and we live kind of close to a flight pattern for UPS. So off in the distance, I hear this huge UPS transport plane coming, and I'm also listening to the whippoorwill. It's just repeating this call over and over and over and over, of course. And as the plane gets closer and closer and louder, finally it gets close enough and the whippoorwill stops. And that was a really somber moment for me, because I realized, I felt like I was deep in the woods, but then I realized how, the man-made sounds, and later we might talk about light pollution, is really impacting these animals in ways that I guess I've heard and I knew about, but boy, when you really experience it, it was really moving.
Yes. And I mean, noise pollution is something that a lot of researchers are looking at, especially during the daytime, and impacts on bird songs and ability to communicate. And it's had, oh my gosh, so many different impacts in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think there's so much being learned about the impact of it. And you were talking about the noise pollution. I just want to say, there's so many sources that I've used that's inspired me over the years. I just want to give a shout out to a book, and maybe you've heard of the book, called The Animal Orchestra.
Mm.
If not, that's one to look into. It is amazing. It talks about impact, and it's just an amazing book, The Animal Orchestra. In
Okay.
our regards, that's a great resource for everyone.
All right, great. Yeah, I love hearing about all the different books that everybody's read and stuff like that too, because nobody can read them all or know them all. So,
Yeah, that's right. And that's one of the great things about being a volunteer at Bernheim or anywhere, is you get to hang around with like-minded people. And I've also found that the people who come to these programs are like-minded people. So it's just fun, layered on fun, layered on fun. So, I love being able to do it.
yes, exactly. And there's two groups of animals that I think we have to talk about when we're talking about nighttime. And one of those are the moths.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I was really surprised. I didn't realize this until I was talking to Shelby Fulton and having a conversation with her, one of the very first episodes of this podcast. But she was saying that if it's 55 degrees-ish, something in that neighborhood, there's some species that might be active then. And then just even right now, as we're recording this, I mean, I know people could be listening to this years from now or months from now, but right now, I mean, it's early April and there's already several moths that are active right now. So just watching the progression of moths and how the different species change. And there's so many different ways that we can even attract them in and be able to observe them ourselves. And okay, most of them are kind of that drab brown, mothy coloration, but then there's some that are really amazing colored, and not just the ones that we always think of with the giant silk moths and the Luna moths and those, but there's some others that are really, really cool as well that we can find.
Absolutely. And one of those that we feature during our summer programs we call Creatures of the Night is the leopard moth.
Mm-hmm.
First, we see the caterpillar. And the caterpillar, if you're familiar with it, is awesome to have to show to a group, because it's black with these sharp-looking hairs on it and bands of red. So, it's a great specimen to show, to talk about how color in nature, even at night, communicates danger. So that red band that it has, is trying to take advantage of how in most all nature, red indicates danger. I'll hurt you, I'll sting you, I'm poisonous, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's harmless, but it's fun that it's kind of mimicking that. And it's plentiful. We see it all the time. It's a regular every year. So yes, hats off to the leopard moth for sure. And then in its adult moth stage, it's very striking. It's kind of a whitish color with spots. That's the leopard part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
pretty good size. So yeah, love moths.
Oh, yes. And with the leopard moth too, if it ever shows its abdomen, which is usually covered by the wings, but oh my gosh, it's this iridescent blue and orange, usually on a kind of a black background, but it is amazing.
I don't know that I've seen that. I'll have to be on the lookout to see it. I always see them from the top down.
Hmm. Yeah, if they feel threatened, if they don't fly away, one of the things that they'll do is they'll kind of arch their abdomen under and kind of spread their wings a little bit, but especially kind of arch that abdomen, and it shows the underneath part. And oh my gosh, it's beautiful. Now, if you flip them over and try and look at it from the bottom, it doesn't have that. It's the back part that has
Gotcha.
that beautiful coloration. Yeah, and I always think the giant leopard moth caterpillar kind of looks like a woolly worm.
Right. It
Mhm.
does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's actually in that same tribe, that same group of moths. It's in that tiger moth group.
Makes sense. Makes
Mhm.
sense.
And then the other group that I think we have to talk about when we're talking about animals that are part of the nightlife are the bats.
Oh, yes.
And they're such amazing creatures. I know a lot of people are kind of like, ooh, bats, but they're not going to mess with you. They're not going to fly in your hair or anything like that. And they're so small and so cute and just absolutely fascinating, all the different species that we have.
They really are. And our guests always enjoy, we have our favorite spots that we'll stop at along one of our programs. And one of them happens to be a small wetland area. And so you have the frogs calling, and you look up and you can see in the twilight of the sky, you can see the bats flying around feeding of the insects over the water. The guests really enjoy that. It's wonderful. Another topic that I bring bats up a lot of time because we have the whole discussion with the group about diurnal versus nocturnal. Humans are diurnal. So I always like to share with them animal sleep patterns, just to contrast it with human sleep patterns. And bats are always first on my list. Actually, bats and possums are known to sleep about 20 hours out of every 24 hours. So they're sleepyheads, it seems like to us, of course. They sleep a lot. And then you get in a whole group of animals that sleep during interval naps. So migratory birds like the Swainson's thrush, they take what's called micro naps. And so they will sleep 8 seconds at a time. I mean, can you imagine sleeping 8 seconds at a time?
I need more sleep than that.
I guess if you do it often enough, maybe it works. It works for them, I guess. Then there's other animals that I call them, they're half asleep because they'll sleep with one eye open. So half the brain is sleeping at different times. And actually ducks, now, you know how it is in nature. I can't say all ducks, but what I could find about this online, I did find that at least some ducks sleep that way. So I guess you're always alert for danger and able to respond even while the other half is resting. But I bring things like that up. It might not be a nocturnal animal I'm discussing, but it certainly is a nocturnal topic. I guess it's fair game on a night program to talk about sleep, especially when you're speaking with humans that are diurnal.
Right. And as we're talking about some of these different animals that are active at night, one of the things that's always interesting to think about is what are they doing? So, like with the bats, they're going out and they're feeding. And if it's a female bat, she might be going out, catching the male, feeding, and then going back to wherever she left her babies and then feeding the young.
Yeah.
With the lightning bugs, they're out there trying to mate.
Yeah, it's really what's going on at night is much of the same thing that goes on during the day. It's just, the nocturnal creatures. By the way, I've recently seen a stat, that says this was a national park source stating that at least 50% of all species on the planet are nocturnal. It seems to kind of make sense, So I've heard it said, that's a way that both an owl and a hawk can share the same resource. It's just very efficient that nature has found these niches. But yeah, like you're saying, a lot of the same things are going on. They're trying to eat, they're trying to mate, they're trying to not get eaten. Same thing is going on in the daytime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've developed all these different adaptations to allow them to do that. I mean, some of them have really good eyesight that's adapted to being able to see at night. That doesn't mean that they can necessarily see really well during the day when there's more light. It's just that their eyesight's adapted for the nighttime. You have bats that can echolocate. You have moths and some other insects as well that can actually pick up and detect the ultrasonic calls of the bats and either potentially react and try and avoid getting eaten by just flying away or tucking their wings and falling for some of the moths to get out of the way. Or some of them can actually produce jamming signals and kind of jam the radar, so to speak, of the bats.
Yeah, I just heard about that a few years ago there. That's right. That blew my mind when I heard that. That's awesome. That's what would you call it? That's the arms race of nature, I guess you would say,
Mm-hmm.
One species will develop, maybe its venom will get more venomous, and then something will become more tolerant to that. So it'll have to get even more venomous. And
Mm-hmm.
one moth will learn to jam a signal, and then the bat will alter its signal. It's ever changing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Exactly. And of course, everybody knows the silent flight of the owls.
Right. Yes, I have actually been speaking with Bernheim. I've been begging them to help me find an owl feather or an owl wing of maybe an owl that was a roadkill or something, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and a hawk. Because if you've ever seen that demonstration live,
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's amazing how the owl feathers are just silent. I mean, that's so cool. And it's
Yeah.
something that you can tangibly show if you got the right props there. So
Yeah. Show and hear.
show,
Because not
yeah,
only
that's
can you
how.
look and see the adaptations on the wing itself, but just flapping each wing, you can hear it. You can hear the
Absolutely.
difference.
Yeah, owls are always welcome guests at our programs. They're they're always unpredictable. I've not found out how to guarantee owls except for one program in the year, and it's the oddest thing. I just stumbled upon it, but every September, I have been 100% for the last, I guess it's been going on maybe 6 years now, where I can take a group out and we can hear screech owls.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always in September in this one location. And I've been there a month before, a month after, and nothing. It blows my mind. And I don't understand why that is. Maybe some of your experts that come on your program can maybe speak to that one day, because it's not mating season. Anyway, I'm just thrilled because it's my only opportunity of the year to guarantee owls to our visitors. So, and screech owls are so fun. I mean,
Oh,
they're just
yes.
amazing.
Yes, they are. I mean, my favorite screech owl story that I've experienced, and probably the first screech owl I ever remember seeing, was actually on our back deck growing up. We had a one-story house, but from the back, it was as if it was a two-story house because of the walkout basement. And we had a back porch going around the back. And I will never forget one night, it was late dusk in the summertime. And my father came and got my brother and I and told us to be quiet and move slow and stay behind him and let us into his bedroom. And right out my parents' bedroom window on the railing of the deck, so maybe 10 feet away from us, was a red phase eastern screech owl just sitting there looking
Wow.
around. It called a few times. I mean, we watched it for what to a little child seemed like an eternity, but it was just so amazing. And then it just kind of flew off. And I will never forget that. And I've always loved them since then.
Yeah, what a great experience and great memory. Yeah, that's awesome. So you did hear it as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love their sound. I think they're so poorly named. I don't find their sound to be screechy at all. I love the way it sounds. I think it's soothing.
Yes.
So,
And then, of course, I love listening to the barred owls that we have around here, and then also the great horned owls.
yeah, and those are sporadic visitors on our programs. We can't, I've never been able to guarantee when you will hear them, but we frequently hear them on our programs. It's always a thrill to get to hear them. There's one in particular when the barred owl gets into a stage of calling that I call hooting it up. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to there, but boy, they can
Oh, yes.
really get going.
Oh, yes. That is always so much fun to listen to them when they get started doing that.
It really is. And I've been fortunate enough to have a group out and experience that with them. And a lot of these people are coming from the city and younger. We get a nice younger crowd, and they've just never experienced these things. And it's just fun to watch the reaction and know that it's introducing them and connecting them, reconnecting them with the nature.
Yes. Exactly. So, since you brought up getting people out there and connecting them or reconnecting them with nature, what are some of your tips for going out and observing some of this nocturnal wildlife and getting out there, especially since you do lead these programs?
Yeah, in terms of finding the programs, I can suggest phrasing that you would put into Google. For example, owl prowl. That's a very commonly used description of an owl program. So, when you type that in the search engine, that might allow you to find that type programs. In night program in general, there's a lot of full moon hikes. So that's probably the easiest one to find in terms of no matter where you're at listening to this podcast, chances are if you'll type in full moon hike or actually moon hike or something like that, hopefully you'll get a hit and a result back that will give you some locations because those are pretty popular and they're a lot of fun. And even though they may call it a moon hike, if you're out there, there's a good chance you might hear other things and see other things. So that's probably your best bet in terms of finding a night program. But I know that the Everglades, for example, they have nocturnal encounter programs, and there's lots of other areas that I've seen, especially getting more popular in the national park programs. They started their initiative on that a few years ago. And I don't know if you've ever seen the posters that they came out promoting the national park programs. They're usually related to stargazing, but they did a whole series of these posters that are just beautiful artwork for the national parks. Again, this is one of those times when I wish I could show the viewers what I'm referring to instead of trying to describe it. But so the national parks are offering more and more of these programs.
In some ways, I'd say if you've got a nature center or a state park or a national park or a local arboretum or something like that, some of these managed natural areas, it might be worth just giving them a call or looking on their website and seeing if they have any night programs, because that's oftentimes a great way to see or hear a lot of different things.
Yeah, because, like on my programs, I have a target list that I kind of go by of what I feel like we'll have a good chance of experiencing for any given month. But then I also have possible targets. So, for example, in April, the primary targets that I would have to show my group would be frogs, millipedes, and glowworms. Glowworms are fantastic. Of course, I won't go into it too much because you've got a wonderful podcast with Lynn, but usually when they see a glowworm, they're seeing the larva of an adult firefly. There can be others, but go to the podcast for more. But anyway, that's the primary things in April that I would be able to show. But possible things would be woodcock, nightjars, possums, raccoons, deer, owl. Any of those might occur at any given time in April. Mm-hmm. And then each month it just goes on. And then slowly things will drop off my primary targets into possible. And then, you're not going to expect to hear nightjars in September, for example.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So get out there and get out there often. That's the best advice I can give people.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'd also say, don't just assume that you can't hear or see some of these things in your own yard too, even if you live in town, because there's so much that's in town. I mean, when I was in college, just outside of town was pretty rural. About half an hour away, there was a very large natural area. But if you wanted to see red foxes, you drove through the older, more well-established neighborhoods in town late at night. And there was a good chance that you would see red foxes playing in the front yards of these well-established older neighborhoods. And that was the place to go if you wanted to see red foxes.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm always amazed at the stories I hear, even in, Louisville, downtown, big city here, there'll be possums. Possums have adapted very well, and there's food to be found around people. So, they're out there looking for it. So you never know what you're going to see when you get out there.
Exactly.
So as we've just said, the most important thing is just to go outside at night. And I want to encourage everyone to resist the urge to immediately turn on your flashlight when you go outside. And there was a poem written by Wendell Berry, and you've probably heard this, but the poem's name is To Know the Dark. And it's just a couple of lines here. But he wrote, "To go into the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. And there's so much that you can pick out from that poem there that is so true. It's amazing. I just love the words that he's used there. So the first thing that you need to do when you want to explore your own backyard at night is, again, walk out, but give your eyes time to do a process that's called dark adaptation. And at first, your vision will seem shockingly poor. I'm sure everyone's experienced that. But even though your eyes are optimized for seeing in the light, that does not mean they do not work at night. The human eye is actually amazing at how well it does work at night. You're primarily missing color, yes, but boy, it rivals a lot of other technology that's out there. Cameras are just starting to catch up with the human eye. So it's really amazing. But after about a few minutes, your eyes will adapt and you'll see better in just 5 minutes or so. But if you do wait, within 30 minutes, scientists have measured this, and your eyes are able to see 600 times more light than you could when you first walked out. So, and actually it's 600 times more sensitive. So that's just amazing how your eyes adapt. So I guess what I'm getting at here is, introduce your nocturnal body to yourself again, because as a human, you're actually pretty well adapted for being out at night and observing and keeping yourself safe at night. We're spoiled, and all the light that we have in our modern society has spoiled us, and we've kind of forgotten how amazing we are ourselves. But that's just one thing, but also the hearing. So another thing that you'll notice is that sound is much louder at night. And at first, when I thought about that, I thought, well, is that my brain tuning in more? Possibly. But actually, there's some physics behind it, because the cooler air is more dense and sound waves travel better through a denser medium. So things are louder at night. So you're going to use all your senses to be able to start detecting and observing, and that compensates for any decreased ability that you have in your vision. So give yourself some time and reintroduce yourself to your nocturnal body, because it really is amazing. And once you do this, you'll get accustomed to it, and all of a sudden you'll feel comfortable out there. But in terms of the actual activities in your own backyard, if you want to start with animals, we've talked about it. Crickets. I feel like crickets are just a wonderful opportunity for people to explore and get to know. That may not excite you enough. So yeah, that might be more of an advanced or something acquired, like a fine wine or something. But I hope everyone will give themselves a chance to just enjoy that night cacophony of sounds that can happen outside. One of the favorite activities that we do on our program that you can do in your backyard, and I bet you've heard of this, Shannon, is an eye shine expedition. Yeah. So if you'll take a flashlight, make sure it's not, the brightest flashlight in the world or anything, but if you'll take just an average flashlight and hold it in your hand and stick it up to your forehead like you're trying to appear like a cyclops, and the flashlight is an eye sticking out of your forehead. What that does is that sets up the angle of reflection just perfect, so that as you hold the flashlight, you'll feel very silly doing this, but as you hold the flashlight up and you scan around, it has to be held on your forehead as you're scanning around with your eyes, both your head and the flashlight's turning at the same time, looking around. What you'll start to notice is little bitty reflections. And those little reflections, and this freaks some people out, but it's actually spider eyes that are reflecting back. But you can only see those reflections if you hold it up there against your forehead like this cyclops view. I'm trying to give you a visual to have there, because that sets up the perfect angle of reflection back to your eyes. And if you have any doubt about what you're seeing, if you'll watch long enough and be patient, you'll actually see the spider will move, and you'll see those little specks move, because sometimes you might think it's a dewdrop or something like that reflecting. But that amazes people on our programs when we do that. And we actually have a baggie full of these small lights that we've accumulated, and everyone's walking around with the light on their forehead and searching. And what you're seeing is these nocturnal spiders, they have very good vision at night. And part of that excellent vision they have is a reflective layer where the light will enter in through the eye, just like it does with us. But instead of it working like our eyes do, there's a reflective layer on the back of their eye that reflects the light out, which actually gives them a second opportunity to capture that light. I won't go into any more than that. I probably couldn't. I'm not a scientist, but that's a common thing. So think about it. You've seen maybe your dog's eye or a cat or deer, raccoon. Most nocturnal creatures have that ability to reflect that light because it gives them superior vision. So that's a lot of fun, as long as you don't freak out over spiders. And you shouldn't, because spiders are so useful to us, right? I mean, they're wonderful. One spider that I will mention real quick, and I bet this is one that you have experienced with yourself, of course, is the granddaddy longlegs. I mean, who hasn't encountered a granddaddy longleg and seen them? But those are very common to see out at night. Again, this rabbit hole, they're amazing. If you dive into just the granddaddy longlegs, something so simple, it's amazing. One thing that we have to do is dispel the urban folklore that they're the most poisonous spider on earth. I don't know if you've heard that, but a lot of our guests actually, they introduced me to that urban myth. And I don't know where that got started, but that is totally false.
Yeah, it's false on so many different levels because granddaddy longlegs technically aren't even spiders. They're harvestmen.
Exactly. And they don't have venom or silk glands. Yeah. So that's a shame that gets stuff like that gets started. But a couple of other fun facts about them, because they're so easy to find and you'll likely see them when you go out looking, is that someone figured out that their leg to body ratio, if humans had the same leg to body ratio, our legs would be over 40 feet long.
Oh, wow.
I love it when, I find these little snippets of visuals like that. It's a lot of fun. And then the other thing that blows my mind is that they have been found as fossils dating back to 400 million years ago. So when you're looking at a granddaddy longlegs, you are looking at Earth history that's beyond what most creatures, have. So.
Yes. And do you know how they defend themselves?
I do not. Oh, well, maybe. Are you referring to maybe the leg coming off?
No.
No, okay.
So one of the ways that the granddaddy longlegs can defend themselves is they produce a scent underneath their legs, kind of where in us would be our armpits.
Okay.
And they basically will take and they'll wipe their feet against those scent glands, and then they wave it in front of themselves. So it's kind of like saying, here, look, smell my stinky armpits, smell my stinky armpits. And it kind of drives off different insects and stuff that might be trying to attack them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll start including that in my talks on granddaddy longlegs. That's fabulous.
Middle school students love that little tidbit of information.
Yeah, that stuff is gold. I mean, that's hilarious and effective. 400 million years of proof at how effective that is.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, so obviously, talking a lot about insects here around your house. So if you're in your backyard, you're going to see insects, and moths are something that should be on your list to take a closer look at. Now, when you're doing that, when you're looking at these, eventually you're going to turn on a flashlight, and you are going to look around, and I understand, but sometimes a light that you turn on will scare any of the mammals, because there's a good chance you could have maybe a possum coming through, or depending on where you live, a raccoon. Rabbits are commonly seen in subdivisions. Rabbits seem to do very well. Bats is something that you can see in your own backyard, especially if you have street lights. You probably see them around the street lights feeding. Skunks, you might smell them before you see them, but keep your nose tuned. So there's a lot going on, really, from your own backyard. A lot of people will set up these, what do they call them, camera traps, where it's just a motion-activated camera, and it's pretty amazing. Most everyone is amazed at what they get when they do that.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of it's unexpected.
Yes, exactly. And then if you are outside, look up. Don't forget to look at the stars too.
Oh, exactly. I probably should have said this at the beginning, but the types of night programs we offer, Creatures of the Night is really the one where we feature the wildlife of Bernheim Forest in our region. But we actually have probably more astronomy related sky programs than anything else. So we have full moon hikes, we have quarter moon hikes, we have Star Stories and Sky Watch. That's more of your traditional astronomy program. That's usually led by another volunteer naturalist at Bernheim. And it's a wonderful program because the local astronomy club will have volunteers come out to set up telescopes. These people are extreme hobbyists. I have seen things in these amateur telescopes I never thought I would see. And that's another thing. If you're looking for night programs, a lot of your local astronomy clubs will offer sky viewing programs, even in the inner city. They offer those in Las Vegas on the Strip.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that amazing? They offer night viewing and stargazing and telescope programs in Manhattan. I mean, because sometimes you just need to go where the people are. It might not, the conditions are deplorable by typical standards, but like you said, just look up because there's always something amazing to see. So the moon slices through any of the light pollution that we have, thank goodness. So it's always, a number one object that you'll want to take a look at. Binoculars really brings it in a lot closer, and it's just wonderful to look at it. And then even a lot of your brightest stars, except for in maybe the most brightest light polluted cities, are still going to come through fairly nice in most cities, actually. I have literally seen the planet Jupiter while I was walking the Las Vegas Strip. So
Wow.
I was just amazed, and I'm so happy, I'm so happy because most of the other things were washed out, but I just felt very proud of Jupiter, just slicing through that light pollution and presenting to everyone, here I am. And what made that more magical for me, I think, is because a few days before that, I had been camping in a canyon in Death Valley National Park, which, isn't too far from Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And just literally 2 nights before I was in Vegas, I was there and I was camping in a canyon and I was sky watching, of course. Death Valley has amazing, clear, dark skies. And I noticed something kind of getting bright on the canyon wall, just above the canyon wall in the sky. It almost looked like what it looks like before the moon comes up when it's rising. The sky got a little bit brighter there. But I knew the moon had already set, so I was very confused about what I was seeing. Well, it turns out I was watching Jupiter rise.
Oh, wow.
And in Death Valley, it's so dark that I could see its light before I could see Jupiter coming over this canyon rim. Blew my mind. But I've been fortunate enough to go to some dark sky areas in the US and experience those things. I've been another time in Death Valley. I was there and the sky was so dark, Shannon, that when I looked up and tried to find constellations, here, the main constellation stars are usually the brighter stars, usually. Right. But there, the sky was so dark that the dim stars were so plentiful, I couldn't pick out a constellation.
Wow.
So I took my flashlight as an experiment and I flashed it on my eyes, which destroyed my dark adaptation a little bit. But then I looked up and the brightest stars I could still see, and there were the constellations. So anyway, you're totally right. If you're going to spend any time outside, please look up because it is just magical. And there's so much to see in your own backyard. That's where I got my start in viewing, was my own backyard. I grew up in subdivisions my whole life. And, there was less light pollution back in the day. I'm going to be 57 this year. So there was less light pollution decades ago, but it was still a subdivision, streetlights, things like that. But it still just filled me with wonder to lay back and stare into space.
Yes, exactly.
So anyway, these are some of the things. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, and those are cool. And like you said, they get your mind working and get you intrigued and get curiosity up. And that's what a lot of it is. It's just getting the curiosity up because none of us can teach somebody everything. I mean, we just don't have time. There's always a shortage of time. So you got to get that inspiration and curiosity going and get them intrigued enough to want to go out and learn more after they leave the program. Because, like I said, you only have a limited time for the program.
Oh, that is so powerful what you just said. I mean, thank you so much for saying that, because really that speaks to the entire purpose of the Bernheim Interpretive Volunteer Program. Because when you come into the program or you love nature, you think information, what's that name? What does that do, or something like that? Well, the Bernheim training program that they so graciously offer to their volunteers teaches us how to communicate and try our best to do what you just described. And that's really taken it to a new level of trying to connect people with things and get them to, like you said, for them to be curious and to be passionate about it. That's the end game. Not that, I know what the name of something is. So that was so awesome. You phrased it perfectly.
Thank you. Thanks. So this has been really a lot of fun. I've had fun talking to you about all this. But is there anything else that you want to share?
Oh, so much that I could go on and on and on. You're just going to have to pull the plug on me, I guess, because, I mean, I haven't even touched on so many things.
Oh, yes. And like you said, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours here because, I mean, this is all stuff that you and I are both passionate about and intrigued about already. And we both enjoy learning more. And no, we don't know everything. So we get to learn from each other and share stories that way and share experiences. But like we were saying, it's not about dumping all of the information that we know on people. It's about getting intrigued and igniting that fire and that passion and that curiosity. So hopefully we've done that with some people tonight, and people will enjoy going out and exploring the night in their own communities and backyards and stuff like that and learning more about what's out there. But
Yes.
yeah, like I said, this has been absolutely amazing and so much fun. If people have questions, can they contact you?
My email is very easy. I'm billnapper@gmail.com. It's pretty easy. And no, I love to talk about this, and I'd love to answer any questions. And I will continue sending you emails recommending topics and people and things, because I love hearing your podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I always enjoy hearing and appreciate getting those recommendations of topics and people to talk to and just all that fun stuff. Thanks. I'm glad you're enjoying the podcast. I'm glad you were able to be on here tonight.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And I mean, we have weekly Zoom sessions with other volunteers, and frequently your podcast will come up. So it's not just me. You're making a difference for a lot of people.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear. But yeah, thanks again for talking with us tonight, and have a great evening.
Thank you. And hopefully I get to see you at one of our programs sometime, Shannon.
Yes, that'd be great. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. I appreciate Bill taking time out of his busy schedule to share with us his passion for the nocturnal world. It is so easy to come home at the end of a long day, eat supper, and then just sink into the couch to veg out for a bit, or to keep ourselves busy with household activities that need to be done. And I'll be honest, I'm just as guilty as the next person of falling into that trap. But nature doesn't stop just because the sun went down. Instead, a whole new world opens up and comes to life. And like I said in our conversation, that world is just as interesting and just as fascinating as anything we find during the daytime. I know Bill and I touched on many different topics during our conversation, and we just barely scratched the surface on any of those. Some of those topics I've already covered in more detail in previous episodes or blog articles. And I'll have links to those episodes and articles in the show notes in case you want to go back and take a look at any of them. Other topics will be covered in more detail in future episodes. However, in this episode, we just wanted to have an easy, fun conversation to remind all of us about how captivating nature's nightlife can be. And hopefully our conversation will help inspire all of us to make that time to go outside at night and reconnect with the nocturnal world in our own ways, instead of just taking the easy route out and sinking into the couch every night. Before I wrap this up, I wanted to ask a favor of you. If you find value in the Backyard Ecology content, please consider joining our community of supporters. There are many ways you can support Backyard Ecology. To learn more, go to www.backyardecology.net/join-us. Until next week, I encourage you to take some time to enjoy the nature in your own yard and community.